call our meeting to order. This is the work session for the board and for the admin and staff. So with that said, the first item we do have a little bit of personnel to handle before we get into the meat of the meeting. And Corey, do you have, you've got a motion for us?
Sure. Motion to accept the letter of resignation from Karen Shepard, high school teacher, effective 9/13/2019.
Okay, and Brian, I know you're just getting into your email, so you haven't seen it, but everybody else should have had a chance to look at her resignation letter. It's effective this Friday, I believe, and she's moving out of state, so.
Due to family reasons.
Family reasons. So anyway, if you want to accept this motion, if you want to accept this letter of resignation from Karen Shepard, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
None opposed. Motion carries 5-0.
The only thing I would make sure is everybody understands that that's our secondary life skills program and has some of our most needy children in that program. It's very much a self-contained program, so we're looking internally and we'll also look externally to fill this position. But it is a position that
In our special education department.
and it's in our
right?
special education department. It's actually in the little building there off of the annex, just down from the K1 entry, right across from the PE building there. So,
Yeah, that'll be a hard position to replace, but.
Dr. Murphy, you and I talked recently about putting some kind of protection in here for the district. If we have these late resignations, I know this, the board can always waive it.
Right.
But in Missouri, I think I had something like this, and you did, if they resign after a certain time.
Right.
They could get out, but there was a punitive financial, monetary disincentive
Right.
for them to pay to get out of the contract. Because this is our third resignation since the school year started.
Right.
And I just like to see some way, put a little teeth in the contract, that if you sign a contract that you plan on being here, I like to think that we can count on you, because this throws a big obstacle into us and those kids this time of the year.
I totally agree.
And I don't know if you can get a copy of that policy and at least show it to the board, and maybe
What
the
I
board
would
has no
share
interest
with
in
you
it.
at this point, you'll see it in tonight's communication as a
Okay.
component for consideration, but I'll still have to vet it with legal counsel.
You bet.
Statutory requirements in the state of Arkansas does not truly allow for you to go after a certificate. I was talking to Dr. Hernandez at the football game Friday night about this very topic based on the prior instances, and then turn around Monday morning and Steve comes to me with another resignation. So I mean, we have to look at everything that we can possibly do from a procedure and policy perspective to have the contract be a meaningful two-way agreement.
Right. Yeah, and I know if you really have to resign, the board should always have the option to waive that.
Right.
If it's legal. It may not even be legal in Arkansas, but I know.
We're definitely taking it into consideration.
Okay, that's all I
It
can
was
ask.
something that the board and I kind of discussed last year. If you remember, kind of in my second year of being here, and then it just seems like we've had just a series of events
Right.
this year.
Well, at least I spoke about these.
Okay.
And before we move into the planning session, I just want to take a moment to introduce Brian Lambert to those that don't know Brian, which I'm sure you all do here.
Hello,
But somebody watching
Right.
the recording later may not, and so this is your first official meeting as a school board member, so we want to welcome you.
Thank you.
Yep. And
Not first.
And so, Dr. Murphy, I'm going to turn it over to you, and are we going according to this?
Yeah,
go
so
through this
we
slide
have
first?
a link there that you can follow along. I think the first thing I would tell you is it's going to be very difficult for us to cover the entire amount of ground with every person here knowing everything about what you see tonight. So tonight is about bringing this current board up to speed as a group. And so in that link of work session, She just clicked on presentation item 1.
They don't have the link to the work session.
We do.
You do?
What's the date of it?
Do you have your agenda?
Oh, we sure do.
Okay,
I
okay,
found
there you
it, but I
go.
don't have it.
I've got it right here.
The updated one?
Okay. But I didn't know they had
Yeah,
it.
you want to go.
Do they have it?
Yes, yes. I think they,
I have that, but I don't have it like it showed up there with the other.
right, no, they've got the notes, but it doesn't have the work session items linked in.
Just take that page right there and just click share.
There's no attachment.
Yeah.
Yeah, that right there.
Oh, yeah, click on that. 'cause that was-
And just share it to him real
No,
quick.
no, that's not it.
I can share
There
it.
you go.
Yeah.
You got it? It says it's shared with 7. You want to share it? Go ahead and share it with each one of the board members, Robin.
No, no, it's group. It was probably group, that one group that she shared.
So,
I thought you had the agenda. If you'd have had the work session agenda shared with you, you should be able to access it through there. because the
Well,
public
she's-
should be able to access it.
while she's getting that, Cindy will be our timekeeper. We're going to
Right.
do our very best to get out of here in 2 hours. And I know that sounds like a long time. There's a lot of stuff to go over. So, Cindy, if you will keep us on track, we will at 5:30.
I'll go
move
into
off of-
item 3. Items 1 and 2 should get us to 5:30. See what questions you have in that regard. This first item that I'm going to be talking to you about is a recent presentation I did at Rotary. If you saw anything in the Sentinel record, it was kind of an outcome of that presentation. We've designed this so that we could go to any civic group and kind of give them a brief overview of the district. So if you know of a club or anyone that is interested in knowing a little bit of an overview of the school district, and maybe you're a part of a group and you'd like for me to go with you and present a little information about the school district. We've talked about going to the Realtors Association before, just any place we might be able to get in front of people and talk about Fountain Lake School District. That's the intent behind this. So in running through this, we identify our school district mission being supporting every student every day for success. The next slide kind of gives an overview of demographics. You know, when you look at our district, we're roughly 1,370 students. There's always a big conversation, are we 1,400 or not? Yes, we are if you include pre-K. No, we're not if you don't. And so you have roughly 60 children in pre-K and 1,307 in the K-12 enrollment. Of that number, we're still running roughly 90 students that are choicing into the district and 34 resident students that are choicing out of the district and attending other schools. We're really uncertain as to the number of kids that we have in our community that are involved in private school or homeschool. The number count does not require for that to come through our office to track individual students. Only if they choose to enroll and then leave would we have an idea, but if they never choose to enroll, we never know that they exist in that context. So free and reduced lunch rate, shortly half of the population, a little over. The graduation rate's been running between 89 and 91% over the last 2 to 3 years. And our college going rate this past year was between 40 and 55%. I kind of ranged this presentation based off of my 3-year experience. So to give you some ranges of this, and our mobility rate, what that means is students that transition into at least 2 to 3 school districts within a year, 10 to 15% of our population will be in 2 to 3 school districts in a year. So that means they're in and out of here. They may be here a quarter, they may be here a semester, and they're a component of the overall assessment data. If they land at our school within a certain time frame, then they'll take our state level assessment test. And we may educate some and they may leave in the same regard. Our teaching experience average is roughly 12 years of experience. And comparatively to your neighbor up the road, Jessieville is running between 6.5 and 7 years experience. We have a very diverse community, and it's blended with a high taxation population with a very low student population called the Village, and a Fountain Lake community that holds a great deal of diversity of the student population in terms of socioeconomic groups. And so we have a very high affluent group that comes to our schools, and we have a very impoverished group that comes to the same school. And to a certain extent, our leaders deal with a series of socialization skills of haves and have-nots and how we all cope together. So that's our demographics. Following that, we have focused on 4 goals, really trying to focus and hone in on how do we strengthen our ability to read and write at grade level and try to build decisions around that. Safety has been something that we have tried to foster and facilitate safety around traffic flow, parking, security, and how we deal with future growth. And so that's a goal that we hold, that when you really get to thinking about these goals, the majority of our work can lead into these goals, because our communication strategies need to continue to be systemic and they need to strengthen for us to be effective. And then we feel as though that we have to provide a level of fiscal responsibility to enhance and balance this whole quality of teacher and retainment of teacher and the element of human resources to provide an exemplary learning environment. So that's the 4 district goals that we hold. Overall, the academics have been framed to, recently we've implemented a literacy program in K through 8, and we're looking at next year following that up with writing. We currently have an after-school program in K through 4, and our high school and middle school provide project-based classes, whether it be Project Lead the Way, partnerships with National Park, health occupations, or potentially an AP course at the secondary level. On our campus, one of the highlights I would mention right now that we're trying to guide is we're wanting to be the first high school in the county to certify high school students as welders and going into the field with MIG and TIG certification. And so we're really trying to take our ag department in that manner. And by second semester, we've got the equipment. We're trying to get all of the appropriate power to power the facility in that regard. And we should hopefully before Thanksgiving be up with over 20 units running on a daily basis of welding equipment there. We do feel like a lot of that will qualify for Perkins, and we should be able to get money recovered on the majority of that as a follow-up with a grant we'll write this fall, and they'll go into next year's budget to receive those funds back. We have an array of online courses in grades 7 through 12. We have these devices that you guys are using. All of our students have the same experience. They have the same platform. So if you mess around with Mail, Calendar, Drive, they've got access to all the same tools that you have. And so it's a reflective cloud-based experience. And when you take and go home, Brian can take his password and log in through Chrome and see the same content on a home computer as he sees on the web browser in the Chromebook here. So we do hold and develop from 5th grade up. It's experimental and it shifts, but we try to design a personal success plan for every kid and really get them thinking about career pathways as a part of that work. So that's kind of the academic prong currently as an overview. It's much deeper than that, but be mindful we're presenting to groups in that regard. Next slide. We've got 19 buildings on the campus. We're going to dive off the deep end and talk about some of those, but Building 8, Building 7, where's it at, Hayden? Building 14 are probably your 3 buildings right now that are portable type buildings that we've developed into permanent structures. And of those, we've got 4 classes in Building 8, have had 2 classes in Building 7. Currently IPT is in Building 7, and this special ed teacher that just resigned is in Building 14 there with the air conditioning unit on the end. And so that's our life skills program for secondary education. And so other than that, Hayden, am I missing any?
There's a few. I mean, you couldn't fit all the buildings on one one slide. So
Right.
There's a few not
There's a
shown
few
on
other
there.
modulars, but
Right.
these are the 19 classroom structures. The only one being excluded there from instructional purposes, I think, is the transportation center. Is 19 transportation system?
19 is on there, but it's not an updated picture.
Okay. Katie, what did you
Eight
say?
is not instructional anymore.
8 is not instructional.
8 is no longer instructional, so what do we have in there now?
One end of it.
Teacher's
Teachers
lounge.
lounge.
The other end of it.
Yeah.
The other
there
end of
is.
it, though, you have, I thought you still had
We do.
special education in there.
And the nurse.
And the nurse.
Yeah.
So our nursing program, self-contained special education classroom is on the right end of Building 8. On the left end of it is where we moved to Teachers Lounge since we redid the front of the K-1 building. Next slide. Overall, this year, our budget will probably project out at roughly $15.85 million. We will probably allocate $9.6 million towards teacher salaries alone. You know, a lot of times you'll get a question as a board member, what are you spending, how many teachers you got? What are you spending on teachers in relation to budget? If you look at the overall amount of money we're spending on teachers, we spend roughly well over half of it. And that's not uncommon, but that does not include your classified staff. You'll have to budget. When I kind of dive you into the funds, Arkansas does not allow for you to put benefits in Fund 1. So when you look at Fund 1, you're only going to see salaries. And so Fund 2 will hold 28% of that teacher's pay. And so I want you to remember 9.6, and I'll show you later on what it'll actually show for someone who is kind of trying to figure out what teachers pay, and they come in and look at our fund balances, how they can be misled. And I'll show you that. So remember that 9.6, and remember that 28% is benefits, and roughly when we budget a teacher, we need to budget $60,000 whether they're coming in on the first step or the fifth step, because the time you do the whole thing, and I'm doing that on an average basis as far as replacement of staff. This past year, we spent roughly $10,500 a student, and our operating ending year balances as of this opening of the 1920 school year, we had $2.5 million and roughly $2 million in the building fund. So that shows you kind of the relationship of true cash availability back to the district if the Board of Education chooses to expand pretty significant projects. We have built some flexibility for the discretion of this board to take on some pretty heavy projects if this board chooses to do so. So this kind of shows you the district. The blue is us. The red is an outline of the village. And the school district resides about right here in relationship to the center of the district. So we run transportation routes 188 square miles from this location to cover all of it, and we do have kids that get on the bus before 6 bells, correct?
That's correct.
Wow. That's amazing.
Next slide.
Very few.
During this last failed millage, some things we were trying to accomplish in this millage was the preschool center, roadway development, parking, site development. You know, I would tell you that those first 2 bullets were talked about, but we clearly did not display the imagery of what we were doing. And I think that hurt us a little bit in terms of our level of clarity, people being able to truly see what we are trying to develop and what we're trying to do. And I think a portion of that was because at the 9th hour, we changed our plan pretty dramatically to get board consensus, and we kind of shifted our plan from an elementary facility back to more of a roadway development and made it more about staffing and professional development in terms of our millage allocation. And so it really, we made a decision roughly in January, February, run a May initiative, and had to carve out a plan between February, when we've been working on a plan since September, and changed the plan in January. So I want you to understand that this failed millage was a culmination of many things, and with that, personally, I'm reevaluating the steps we need to take to truly engage the community. It looked at cafeteria expansion, replacing buses, enhancing teacher salaries, looking at educational curriculum, expansion of preschool, and most importantly, addressing and getting additional social emotional help with mental health and wellness on the campus. So that's an overview of the vote. Roughly, you may or may not have seen this. 168 yes votes and 733 no's, and we didn't do any better at the Village Bible Church, where we had 85 no's, 85 for and 344 no's. If we could have got more to come to Fountain Lake and vote, we won there 310 to 79. So roughly, where did we land on a full 4 meal increase? We had 659 yes votes and 1,271 no votes. Next slide. I put this in here because I want to get into the village, talk a little bit more about school choice, but it kind of goes back to those numbers, allows some questions to be asked, and quite frankly, in the element of moving forward, this is a state and federal statute. And so we spent a lot of time, the board members and I, when we went into the village, we had individuals telling us to go challenge that statute. We saw a white paper that they wanted us to sign in partnership, for them to be in partnership and support, and quite frankly, I did not feel comfortable trying to challenge a state and federal statute in that context. It doesn't mean you can't talk to the legislative body, but it's not going to significantly change the landscape. Since I've been here, it was challenged by all schools in Garland County on the DSEG movement, and it was denied in the 8th Circuit Court. And so the statutes that we hold are the statutes we're going to continue to comply with. Next slide. Here's some things just as a point of reflection. You know, you may have said, Mr. Little, some things that you've experienced in your short tenure on the board. In my 3 year, this is now starting my 4th year, we've hired an elementary principal, a director of instructional services, 2 high school principals, and a director of support services. And then we shifted the landscape, bringing Hayden to director of support services, and Joel took on the duties of supervisory maintenance and transportation. Unfortunately, we've had to hire 3 head football coaches in 4 years, replaced a bookkeeper and an entire high school math department. So we've experienced significant change. And so in the context of that, stabilization at a board level is critical. The next thing, you look at the bottom point. The elected, appointed, served board members within the context, since I've been here now starting my 4th term, I've worked with 13 different board members in the educational process. And so solidifying the Board of Education and allowing us to move forward as a unit, I think, is a critical element for the success and stability of the school district. Here's some things to celebrate. Even though that sheet looked pretty rough, you know, we have stabilized the finances. We've been able to put some AC in the gym. We bought 20 acres behind the football field. We did a major improvement to the roadway behind the auditorium. We've created access control throughout the campus. A double swipe on that key fob with our administrators will lock down the entire campus. And so with that, we've upgraded the entrances to K1, 2, 4 in the high school, partnered with the PTO, and they put in a brand new playground. We've increased food service participation by nearly 20% year over year. And with that, we've added breakfast to the classroom and K through 4, and maintained our one-to-one environment, and picked up a state-funded preschool this year. So along with that, we've implemented our literacy curriculum, expanded our alternative school with a partnership that we're serving more students and recovering more revenue in the alternative learning element. And down at the bottom, you can't hardly see it, but we did implement a early release that allows for our teachers to collaborate on a weekly basis with an early release on Wednesday. So, you know, a portion of maybe our work has possibly created, because there's quite a bit of assertion there that went into our work. We accomplished quite a few tasks, and so I don't know to what degree The other slide coincides this one, but I am still very concerned that we have to stabilize the environment and build a culture of cohesiveness long term. I put this out as a point of interest to understand that many times we look in many different ways to improve instruction. And I think we're at a tipping point as a society, especially as public schools, that we have to respect the importance of social and emotional learning. Social and emotional learning examples would include mental health specialists in the school setting, social workers in the school setting, doing things to assist students and families before they get to the edge. And so with that, you'll see some of our work that we're going to be discussing tonight have an emphasis on this, and also put us in a position where we feel we can fund some of those ideas. So any questions at this point? We've got roughly 5 minutes. You started me 10 minutes late.
Why'd you give her the gavel?
So is there a quick question on the slides? Anything that somebody wrote something down, they just...
I have one question. On slide 4, we're talking about certifying our students for welding.
Mhm.
Is there any industry in Hot Springs that uses a lot of welding that we can partner with and
Express boats and...
get some of their expertise out here?
Right.
Or what they want to see from our graduates?
Yeah, so we're creating those partnerships through our intern programs, as well as bringing them to the forefront of what it is they're needing in the field.
Okay.
And so we're listening to industry.
And there's a way to put that in the slide. I think that's good information.
Right, to show that partnership.
To show that partnership, okay?
Yeah, we've talked to Mr. Mercer about that. It's not only Express, he's got about 3 different groups. Frank, you mentioned one to me, the other one...
Aerospace.
I know Baxley Engineering.
Baxley.
Yep.
Yeah, that's the one you and I talked about. So there's more than one player in town that
Well,
really needs
just a lot of
qualified
welders.
welders.
Good, and I was hoping we would take advantage of that.
Yeah, I mean, just around, I mean, you got Caterpillar and
SBI, I mean, there's a long list.
Yeah.
Triumph, Malvern.
Yeah.
Maybe get some of them to hand down some of their old equipment if it's good enough.
Right.
For training
Reutilize.
purposes.
Well, even in that program there, we're looking long-term at pulling that classroom out of there and expanding the shop. The classroom's actually built in the shop.
Okay.
And so if we could build the classroom adjacent to the shop, then we would have the full square footage
Right.
of the shop.
And build it as it's needed.
Yes.
Designed for welding.
And we're going to allocate a back corner of it to get these welders up and running. We're going to work within existing space. The classroom's going to stay where it's at for right now.
I think to me, that's a great, because we've got 45-50% of our students going on to college. The rest of these kids need to be going into trades or
Right.
some type of profession, so.
Right. That would be beneficial and high paying coming out. Now the next slide that I'm going to show you here really is a teachable moment on cash flow and cash position. What I want you to try to ignore for the busyness of the slide tonight, I would be more than willing to walk you through all of the inside revenue, non-revenue, non-expense expenditures. Revenue and expenditures is self-explanatory. Non-revenue, non-expenditures is transfers required by law to balance the books per the audit. So what I'd really like you to focus on is the far left column where you begin and the far right column where you end. And so what I would tell you is in this slide you have 18 and 19 starting balances. Robin, if you click on the next bottom slide, it gives you the next bottom tab. There you go. That gives you 1920 where we're starting at. But if you go to the next slide over, it gives you a comparison over the prior 2 years. And so with the board in the July work session, you saw these numbers and they were not finalized. Now they've been finalized, they're in the books, and each of the funds is depicted on the right. Dana and I discussed, we thought we needed the cheat sheet on the right. So the cheat sheet on the right alludes to the teacher salary fund. So if you scroll down and then back up, you're going to be looking at 17, now you're looking at 18. And you can see that we went from roughly 6 million down to 5.9 million in the overall teacher salary fund. that ends up being zeroed out. The two funds that I would tell you that consistently have grown is the overall building fund. We've been able to build back up slightly, and the overall Fund 6 we've been able to practically double. So we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about those two areas. So looking at the right-hand side, just as an overview, you have the teacher salary fund, what we call the overall operating account or the operating fund. Fund 2 has no restrictions to it. Whatever we choose to use that money for, we can use it for any purpose across the board. Fund 3 is considered to be the building fund, and you can, if you get in a bind, write a proposal and transfer money from the building fund back into the operating fund. So it's not that the $2 million that's there is not transferable back to the operating fund if you need it for specific purposes. So roughly those two funds is where the lion's share of the overall cash flexibility is held by the district to exceed $2.5 million. The Q-SCAB, I've had that pulled out and earmarked because we're going to continue to build that note up to the total of the $2 million that was borrowed, at which point in time there'll be a payoff and it'll go away. We're collecting. It was an original federal stimulus program that allowed us to borrow money at 0%, so it's an accounting process. And so I've separated it out in Fund 3 because if you don't, somebody goes in and looks at the state level, you go in and look, you're going to see our building fund be over $3 million. And they're going to say, you got $3 million. Why aren't you using that? We have $2,056,000. And so there's many things, when you look up there and you say, well, how come you're only paying your teachers $5.9 million? What did I tell you we were paying teachers on that other slide?
9.6.
There's two examples that immediately mislead the public. And they have the latitude to go to the state website, and they're going to see Fund 1 as Fund 1 is, and they're going to see Fund 3 blended. They're not going to see the Q-SCAB pulled out because not everybody has a Q-SCAB. And so there's not a place for it to be separated out. So I've separated it out intentionally so it can be seen. Fund 4 is what we're going to make in the debt payment allocation on a continuum, and so that's paying off our current debt. And with the former board, we did two exercises to identify a window of time where we pay off a portion of debt in roughly 25, 26, and then the remaining amount of debt in roughly 35, 36, and I'll have Beardsley coming in this fall so you can kind of see the debt side of the landscape in more detail. So, but we have two notes that are out there existing. They're separate, and they have different payoff points. And that's what Fund 4 pays. It makes the debt and principal payment on those notes. Fund 6 is all of our federal programs, and Fund 6 is an area that we've invested in and it's paid off. We have invested in a Medicaid stipend and trying to spend some time really focusing on collecting Medicaid eligibility. And so if you go back, Robin, to the top, look at Fund 6 beginning balance 2 years ago. It was $33,000. And so between the beginning balance of when we started this program, we were at $33,000, and we were not allocating expenditures out of it because it was pretty much flat before then. And so since then, we've grown that balance roughly $150,000 year over year. Take us back down to Fund 6 and where we just ended. On down to the bottom, please. There you go. And we went from 154 now to 346 ending. And so this is an area where I feel like that the board can constitute the qualification of mental health needs, because we could hire a social worker out of this fund, we could hire a mental health specialist out of this fund, and we could run this as a 3-year. We've already taken the nurse and placed in this fund, the LPN, and I think those 3 positions could run cash flow neutral in Fund 6 and still have you a healthy balance in the event that we have tomorrow we could have a $60,000 kid enroll. And it wouldn't be of anyone's control at the table. If that child chose to come to our school, they potentially could cost the district more than $60,000. We qualify for high needs funds, but still yet it doesn't pay the full bill. So you have to keep a balance to handle special situations and circumstances. Also in Fund 6, all of our title money is run through there. But when you look at the overall, if you flip this thing on its head away from revenue expense, where's your revenue coming from? Up at the top, second line over, Fund 2, right? $14,400,000. That's
So,
taxpayer dollars.
Taxes.
So we are so unique. Don't go to ASBA this year and try to talk finances with everybody else at the table, because the way you look at finances and the way they look at finances will not be the same. Because they're going to be very reliant upon portions where state funding is the big deal. And our big deal is local taxes. It makes up roughly 80% of the budget, if not more.
And isn't Fund 6 the one where you have to be really careful what you use it for?
It's
Because
you have to be very methodically in terms of the strategies that you apply, because once we go use Fund 2 money on that program, we cannot go back and use Fund 6 money later.
Gotcha.
If we use Fund 6 money first, we can support a program and continue to feed that program infinitely. But if I choose to pair that expenditure, Fund 6 and Fund 2, it'll trump it out and you can no longer use 6.
So if you-
6 is to supplement the educational program in some fashion, not to supplant or become the
Right.
educational program. And so we've kind of used some strategies around our literacy program. In the element of supplanting, we intend to use 2 budgetary cycles and try to exhaust the majority of our Fund 6 dollars towards building and expanding the classroom literacy framework without being the replacement thereunto. So the original curriculum purchase was done out of Fund 2, and then the supporting evidence of that was done out of Fund 6.
Supplemental.
Be
Yeah,
supplementing.
That's what we
Supplemental.
talked about.
Yes.
In buying those literacy
Uh-huh.
sets, we talked about.
Exactly.
the
Those are
supplement.
Making them
Supplemental.
supplemental.
Right, making them
Right.
supplemental.
So
They
that's,
are supplemental.
that's how we utilize the funds.
They are, I understand.
Funds 7 and 8, for the sake of time, because I'm getting ready to get the gong here.
No, you're not, you have some time.
No, you have,
Fund 7 and Fund 8 allow for any activity. So if we have athletic gate, if we have the band boosters, if we have the Pee Wee program, anything that our auditor looks at is run through Fund 7. Cash in, cash out. This past year, cash in, cash out was flat. 171 to 171 is with 100.
Is that where your uniform purchases come from? or
Well,
do we break them out of
oftentimes,
operating?
we'll talk about that tonight, but in most instances, depending on the program, sometimes you'll fund it 50/50, where
Parents who donate.
yes.
Right.
donations will pay for a
And then we'll bring the
portion,
rest
and
out
then
of
we may
operating.
offset that, and we do a 50/50 partnership, or if, they're wanting something that we can't afford to pay for, they may pay 100% if they can fundraise it.
Like a band trailer.
Yeah. Fund 8 went up slightly. This is your food service. It went from 45,000 to 76,000, so we increased student participation by roughly 20%, and in that, we started spending, almost 700,000, and we brought in 720,000. So that's kind of
And
where
did-
you washed out, and that's after you paid your contracts and everything with Chartwells and them getting their part.
is that also where you purchase new cafeteria equipment out of that fund?
Yeah.
Okay, because
Yeah.
we did a lot of improvements. If y'all haven't had a chance to see, y'all should go see.
So I would love to sit down individually with any of you to further dive into the financial position. I think the number one objective of a board is to understand the overall financial position of the school district. Now, we can talk all day long how we spend a dollar bill, but we all have to understand how much money we have, because that's going to help us build the confidence to make big decisions. Okay, let's continue to travel.
Oh, no.
What do you got next?
Moving on. The 1920 budget.
Okay, so some of this kind of ties together. We're gonna skip the line items because we covered that already, Robin.
Go to
Let's
number
go to
three.
number 3. Yeah, 3 will be the best next one to go to. There you go. Yeah, that one there. Now you saw this in a format of each fund. Now I want you to kind of look at it differently, but in the same way. And we're in a new 30-minute interval.
Cindy's just getting clarification if she's gonna go on mute at 6 o'clock.
Right.
Okay,
I'm gonna give you
6:15.
notice at 6, just
All
to
right,
kind of
all
start
right,
slowing it
all right.
down.
Yes, yes,
There we go.
15-minute notice would be wonderful.
There you
That's
go.
fantastic.
Yes,
Well, actually, it's supposed to be on number 4 at 6.
right.
So we actually have 16 minutes to get through this page. and a
Yeah.
half.
Yeah, I got it.
So let's see what we can do here within the
5
next
minutes, I'll give you
15
notice,
minutes.
uh-huh.
You saw Fund 1, but now you don't really see Fund 1 in the aspect of revenue because Fund 1 does never draw any revenue. So this is the first reason that you have the non-revenue transfer. And so your revenue comes in Fund 2. You can see the total allocation. You can see the first column on your left is what we budgeted a year ago. So that's 18-19's budget at 12,977. We brought in actually 13.2, so we roughly brought in 300,000 more than what we budgeted in the area of revenue with local taxes. That was setting a collection rate last year at almost 99% and everybody wincing. So we did have some one-time payment and allocations, but a couple of things that go into that number is I look at the increase in the overall assessment to create the new projection, and so you went from roughly 380 million in assessment to 389 million. So you're going to have new cash flow coming in. It won't be significant, but it will be sufficient enough for us to increase the budgetary number to roughly 13.2 million. Now that is where the majority of the money is coming from. As you go down, this gives you a chance to kind of talk about, some people were asking about state funding. That first line tells you that you're now out of the formula again. But being out of the formula, because of the increase in the taxes, it's kind of a trade-off because you were able to increase your overall taxable amount to 13.2, where we were at roughly we'll come in about 150,000 higher than that. I thought when we come out of the formula, when I did the full math lesson on it, we probably cash flow gain 150,000 by being out of the formula. Well, it's not truly shown and reflected in its full value here because every time you present a budgetary number, it's going to fall, you're going to try to reach it. And so in our tax collection, I've set this number as realistically we will achieve and reach 13.288 or more with where I've set that number.
Local tax revenue.
In local tax revenue.
Okay.
Rest of that's kind of controlled by the state, identifies how we're coding it. You can kind of continue down to the bottom of it, just to the bottom of that category. So because we're out of the formula, we went from 993 in the collection down to 880. So we lost money at the state level, gained money at the local level.
Okay. And you're budgeting in there declining enrollment money?
Go
I
back
saw
up
that.
there. Yeah,
Go
I think
just
it's
a
in
little
there.
bit, Robin.
Yeah, I think it's guaranteed based on where we were at.
It is, okay.
Let me look. There it is. Declining
120.
enrollment, roughly 120,000 because of they go third quarter ADM, average daily membership. They'll take the first 3 quarters, average them out, and they're always a year in the rears. So we're taking that 17-18, comparing it to the 18-19 we just closed. We went from 1,410 or 15 students down in the 1,370 range, which qualifies us for declining enrollment funds
Okay.
to the tune of 120,000. There's your special education catastrophic. If you do have that $75,000 per child expenditure that shows up, You can qualify for, once it goes 3 times beyond the reimbursement amount, you can get full value in return. So when we have a really high special needs student, we can get some money back through what's called special education catastrophic. And so we get to recover some of that money, but we're going to spend roughly the first $20,000.
And that's state money, not federal.
Yes. Travel on to the next one. There's your debt service fund in terms of revenue allocation. At this point, federal, 882 to 876. So here again, trending down slightly. I will tell you that that 120,000 is in jeopardy in terms of the FACES program. We'll be discussing that tonight. Don't count on it moving forward. We may have to figure out how to budget for that locally. We'll be applying for the grant, but our counterpart in Jessieville lost their grant this past year, and we've had very similar programs. Ours probably had some true highlights in it, but when I talked to educators in my home, where I was at in Missouri and other states, this 21st century money is being phased out. It's federal allotment. Fund 8, we're budgeting roughly, thinking we'll bring in 665. For the sake of getting into the real meat of kind of where I want you to have discussion, I'm not going to take you into specific categories. Continue on down, Robin, you'll get them to the expenditures. What I want to kind of do is say if we have an expenditure model of roughly each salary staffing allotment with the raises in place, we're going to have roughly, go to the very bottom. I think this is a conservative estimate of, keep going. I think that this conservative estimate will cash flow the other way. After I worked with Tanya some more, I talked to her today, and we were at about 400,000. She's been in here working on this spreadsheet. In that, we have a structural flexibility in our budget that I will show you in the balances. It's roughly $700,000. So what I would like for you to think in a big picture is how do we apply $700,000 over a 2-year period?
Say again, where's this 700,000 you're talking about?
Go back out of here because this is not what it needs to be. It was at about 400,000 earlier today, so I'm gonna have her come completely out of this document, and I'll continue to work on it. And if I have any
What was
changes to it,
instead
I'll
of
let you know.
106?
I'll show you where it's at.
Okay,
Go to the fund balance sheet again, number 2. Right, and then go to comparisons.
Bottom tab.
Tab here on the bottom. Scroll down to the year in which we're in, just finished. So what we're looking at is the year we just ended in July. The reason I say that we've got this structural gap is we've continued to add money to our overall balances. And so this non-revenue transfer right here is the excess money that we
right,
took out of Fund 2 to keep Fund 2 the same.
right.
So if Fund 2 stays the same, you put the excess in Fund 3.
Mhm.
And so in the structure of the budget that we just finished, the only things that we've done to that budget is put $500 on the base.
Right,
And with that, it did not consume that dollar figure. So there's roughly, in my opinion, there's $700,000 worth of flexibility in the budget design over the next 2 years. And you can spend that, as I'll take you into here in a minute, as a one-time expense, or you can spend that in a reoccurring fashion. People are recurring, buses are not. And you balance those two out and make decisions around that so that you don't stretch the rubber band too tight, but you don't need to end with a $700,000 surplus.
right. And you think that this 1920 working budget that we were just looking at,
Is wrong.
is incorrect
Is
from
wrong.
an expense standpoint. You
Yes.
think the revenue numbers
I think the revenue numbers
are
are pretty solid.
pretty accurate?
Yeah, they still, I think they're conservative, the
Okay.
revenue numbers. I think when we get to this time next year, our budget will be approaching $16 million of actual cash.
Hmm.
And I think
So-
we're roughly coming in there estimating 15.8 something in revenue.
Yes, 15,855.
And that's a budgetary number. And so what I would tell you in the budgetary design,
Right.
you know, trying to tighten that revenue side, you want to meet that revenue. You don't want to fall short of it. So we don't want to over project, but we want to realistically design an opportunity to where I want that surplus to be lower. And you know, there's a few ways that you can consider doing that as a board. The thing I would tell you that makes us an anomaly is if tax collections tanked for whatever reason and we couldn't predict it, you're going to deficit spend. Because you are so heavily reliant on a number that's based on tax collection.
Right. Which is relatively stable, but at the same time,
Right.
unpredictable if something catastrophic happened to the economy or something.
And as a board, you're currently in a position where you got $4.5 million to react to it.
Okay, so so I know you said these numbers are not correct,
No.
and, but, so.
She's put something in there that's incorrect because it shouldn't be a deficit of $106,000.
Okay,
So we're going to, at this point in time, I'm going to apologize for showing them to you. And she was at a meeting all day, just like I
Right.
told you she was.
Yes.
She come in here and went to
Yes.
work on them at 3:30.
yes,
And she's probably still in there working on them now. And if she is, it could change before the meeting's over. So I
Okay.
think that would not be an accurate, reflective document if you'll work with me in the context of understanding the budgetary structure. As we've seen it in the last 2 years, it has surplus.
right, it has.
So structurally, there is a surplus.
They're probably not as big as previous because we have put some money on the base, you know, and I think that's gonna eat into that surplus.
So Robin, go back to that other thing. We're making too many speculations here. Go down, farther,
Farther,
all the way down to roughly, we're gonna jump around a little bit, go to 2019, click on that tab right there. Now, I just showed you $700,000 worth of flexibility.
Mhm.
And now what I'm gonna show you is the staffing model in the current year that's not even included in that number.
Okay.
And this is staff year over year, so when you pull this down to the bottom line, pull it down, I'm not worried about who the people are.
Right.
Right there. We have a $228,000 savings in staff year over year in replacement of position to position.
through attrition.
Through attrition, through not replacing the football coach and the reassignments portion of it, because that position wasn't
Or through
replaced.
retirements.
Or through retirements, or through hiring back an employee. There's employees in there that cost us more money. So year over year, we track every one of those employees, every motion that you've made.
Right.
There's a cash flow effect on every line item.
Mhm.
And so outside of that $700,000 that I showed you, we currently have the flexibility of $228,000. And that covered the raise that you just talked about.
Okay.
Remember, we talked about that in June,
Mhm.
that we probably would have enough in staff savings. If we didn't get it in new revenue, we could cover it
Gotcha.
in that regard. So we've got that, and if you click on the classified, there's roughly, I think, $35,000 worth of savings on the classified schedule based on year over year. 36,000, I'd say.
Okay.
So in the personnel line changes that we've made, in the realignment of staffing and the discussions about educational programming, we've positioned ourselves to rehire people as we feel will best align to our goals. And our job, my job, is to put us in a position as a team to make effective decisions and be able to pay for it. And quite frankly, we're there. And so now we have to build the confidence that we're there to make the hard decisions on how we move that forward. And so, you know, you're not going to be comfortable tonight. Tonight is about truly exposing you to the depth and breadth of what it looks like, and try to keep you at a level of really thinking about, if we have that degree of flexibility, how do we best invest it in our kids and our school? And my goal would be, through a 2-year window, to take that overall amount of structural variance that we have and diminish it, but not take it all away. Because I'm making these assumptions with assessment remaining flat to slightly increasing. If you can't control it, but if assessment goes down 5% reassessment, then we may need a little bit of that structural gap to cover the difference.
Right.
So we don't want to erode all of it, and that's why we work at balancing purchasing of equipment and buses and projects with raises and new hires and additional staffing. So we have 6.
6 o'clock.
Okay.
So
So-
that leads you into the
Right.
projects and ideas
Right. So
to be considered.
with that kind of gets us, okay, we got our hands in here, and so now we're going to kind of turn to, this is nothing more than discussion and ideas.
Right.
And so as a team, we sat around today and we talked about things that we felt in the 1920 year, if we were to target and say, okay, we've got a structural variance of roughly 600, let's be conservative and say 600,000, knowing that it could be as much as 800, okay? We tried to prioritize some things that would help our school in the current year. One of the things that I've observed that concerns me greatly is at times when, and you may not think it's that big a deal, and it's not a huge expense, but by the time we get it worked out, it's going to cost some money.
Right.
But we need to make sure that the field house and the Agri building, if we pick up an all-call intercom and make an emergency announcement, they need to hear it, and the secretary doesn't need to remember to call that area.
Right.
In our district right now, if we don't remember to call that area, they are not notified. And that could be a huge problem. So we've listed that as one of the first things that we think would help build the confidence of all students, because I'll give you an example. It wasn't an emergency, but we called a special meeting to announce a football coach, and there was kids in the field house that never heard the announcement, didn't show up for the meeting. That's an example. And some of the kids, if they're at the field house, they probably need to come down to the meeting.
Probably so.
But they didn't go to the meeting because they never heard about
Know about it.
the all-call. So, and that's just a singular event. We do feel like that through these targeted individual sublines, we could acquire out of our balances in the special education fund, we could probably pay for another special education bus this year out of the structure of that, and then possibly buy 2 route buses with, you know, all 3 of them, new gas buses with AC. We're getting a quote on them right now. We're going to make sure that we invest to cover the entire electrical upgrade, everything within the welding program. We're looking at and that roughly, if you're looking for numbers, I would tell you that those buses are going to, on new buses, if they're going to be 80,000 a piece. And then the short bus is probably going to run 55, 60. We don't have quotes on them right now, but you need to budget, you know, we're going to use 225 if we go that route. But that's one-time money
Right.
that could be available the following year.
And we'll later get dollars for each of these projects,
Yeah.
okay?
Right.
Tonight, I didn't want to get us
No.
too deep into dollar
I understand.
bills. I wanted to really get your reaction. It's a little unfair to say how much you like it until you know how much it costs. But in the same regard, I think we need to focus on how well does it tightly align to our goals before we even think about dollar allocation.
Well, you know, the B part of that in the personnel, You know, I like what you talked about in terms of a social worker or a mental health professional. I don't know if one can adequately serve our campus. I'm guessing y'all talked about that.
We feel like it'd be a great starting point.
Yeah.
With those people.
I mean,
And we feel like that we could generate additional revenue to actually support paying for the position, because we're not getting to serve the full population that's out there. So if we start serving them, we'll
Yeah, you can start.
we'll increase the overall revenue in Fund 6.
Right,
So a portion of that will actually
be
pay for itself. It will not pay 100%.
right.
But it potentially could pay 25% of those two positions, and a social worker is much cheaper than hiring a teacher. I mean, you could roughly hire one for $35,000. You know, depends on how you advertise, what you set up, length of term, whether you want that person to be 12 months, whether you want to be 9 months. So there's a lot of conversation that has to go into the final decision. But most importantly, any of these things we do will be based on the quality of the individual, not the program design.
Right. And did y'all prioritize these? Are these in the order that y'all agreed, or some kind of priority order?
It's not a true one before I two. We did try to prioritize them a little bit in a manner of a realistic approach. I didn't want to just nail down the priority, because I really wanted you to kind of see, is there something here that you hear a lot from the communities not on the list? That'd be the first thing I'd ask you. Because you may hear things that the team doesn't hear. And that's what, we need to, if there's an idea or a concept and we think it aligns tightly to our goals, then, maybe we need to get it on the page for consideration, because we need to make sure that we don't lose things on the page, because remember, we're trying to think in a multiple year fashion, not an annual. I'm really trying to get us to think in a 2 to 3 year window more so than a single year window. And I promise you, I'm not going to stretch you into exhausting all your structural flexibility in 1 year. Because at the end of the day, I've got to defend the overall financial condition of the district, not the board. The board is going to have to ultimately defend it through me, but I'm responsible for ultimately making sure that the numbers work.
So I don't want to jump ahead of you.
You go right ahead.
But I want to ask, in the item 4, the budget for 2021, when you have some personnel items, and then you have a Chromebook recycle, so would that be, you're talking about this current list we're looking at is over 2 years, but then next year those things are going to be additional money
Right.
on top of that?
And so the way I tried to separate those out for you, things you could consider in 2021 that could be reoccurring. And so what you see there are things, if we choose to do them, we're going to be paying for them long term.
Okay. The items above are,
Go back up there to the above.
except for those few personnel
Right.
items, these are all one-time things.
Right.
And then you've got a few personnel that would be
Recurring.
Okay.
And I didn't
Gotcha.
catch all my verbs, but I went and checked that, Campbell, and recurring actually creates a consistency of a continuum. Reoccurring is not continual.
And the academic support there at B1
Yes,
really is, by the time you could do something, to hire someone would really be for A1 on your sheet here. It would go down. It would be
Okay, the
those.
instructional coaches
Yeah.
and facilitators.
By the time you could actually hire someone. it
Right,
would
because
be-
it's not gonna happen this year.
But I'll give you an example, Steve, of the academic support in the interim, is we have freed up flexibility to encourage staff who want to come in from 7 to 8. We're going to open up both sides of the cafeteria, and if you're seeking, we're going to call it academic support, not tutoring. But if
Okay.
you want to have a location to come to and get help from certified teachers between 7 and 8 o'clock in the morning, if we can get people to staff those days, We're gonna have people available for students to have a location. You as a parent, you're concerned, you don't know where to go. At least you've got a little bit of an additional window because we have a lot of kids that get here before 7:30. And so we could use this as a blended latchkey program that also provides instructional support and pay teachers who want to make additional money to start work at 7 o'clock. So that could occur
This
in a
year.
month.
Yeah,
I could make a recommendation at this next meeting to allow for us to expand the planning of the $24 per hour, $25 is what we're paying on an hourly rate basis. And so if we staff 4 teachers in there, that's $100 a morning, that's
Right.
$500 a week, you're talking less than 10 grand on the year.
right.
So I mean, you know, worst case 20. If we, depending on the number of teachers that we use, we're using middle school and high school, to at least provide another avenue
Yes,
for students to have access to, it's not gonna save everybody,
right.
but it's an extended opportunity in a time frame of the day that is not conflicted with extracurriculars for the most part.
Right,
There's sometimes a band will call a special deal, or sometimes a club or another group, but in general, it's a pretty good time to capture students and catch them when, you know, if they'll settle in while they're fresh.
yeah.
Some are still
Do you think-
asleep, but some could be fresh.
You think middle schoolers would do that?
We would have some that would.
We have somebody here.
We have some that are here before, I'm here between 6:45 and 7, and they're already outside. So that would give them opportunity to do that. But we would have a handful, and maybe even more as it went on.
Right. And I would tell you that it would be one of those things that we could invest in and then begin to promote, because it may take most of this year getting our parents to know. Now, you guys are sitting here as board members, you're thinking this would be a really good thing. Our biggest challenge will be, how long will it take to educate the general population that we have a 7-day tutoring program? It could very well take us 3/4 of the year before some people even know that we're offering the program. And so, you know, communication to me will be critical in terms of evaluating the program, and I feel like it's a program that warrants a multi-year approach, not a 6-month approach. It's something that we'd have to probably build through time, evaluate if that's the right location, you know, really
Right.
think about how we provide continued academic support beyond the instructional day. But it's a strategy.
Mm-hmm. And so, on the one-time expenses,
Go back
One-time
up just a
list.
little bit, Robin, because I think you're looking at the current year right here, right?
yes, the current
Yeah.
year. So in
This
the
is
one-time
1920, that's
expenses,
the year you're in.
so like you're gonna bring us a bus proposal soon,
Mhm.
in the next month or so.
Right.
What about some of these others? Are you going to, who's gonna make that decision? You are gonna bring these things to us?
I'll bring I think the board needs to have some input in the direction that we take. We'll make recommendations, but I feel like you guys need to have the ability to help guide that. Specifically, if we get deeper into this thing tonight, you may find that the cost savings in purchasing the land drives it all the way to 1,
Yeah,
based on what you see tonight as board.
right.
So it really, you know, and then the other thing with this that we're not even talking about is over the last 2 years, we've built our balances. And so in the context of this, a land purchase could come out of the building fund, and then you deficit spend that amount in 1 year. Because you have ample available money to design a deficit spend budget. I've never designed one for you yet, and we could continue to have a budgetary structure with this, and eventually you're going to have $5 million in the bank. That'd be a great thing. But it's the board's due diligence, you know, to create a budget that balances itself through time, and you can deficit spend with intentional purpose within a year,
Right.
and reset your building fund at $1.3 million and come in there with a plan and educate the community on the plan, and you didn't do anything wrong.
Right.
You had a purposeful plan. Now, if you want to be the board that builds the bank until you want to do something, the question will be, will your comfort level be after you get to $5 million? Or will it be $7 million? Or will you never be comfortable with a deficit spending budget?
And that's something to be discussed, but, you know, I think I like that y'all are coming up with these ideas, just like you do every year on spending projects, whether it be repaving or whatever. So I like seeing, some of these have come up before.
Right.
And, you know, so I feel like it's not our job to just sit on money. If it's something that aligns with the goals of the school and fits into one of those academic or safety or other goals. And you know, people are noticing already some of the things that y'all have gotten done over the summer, and people are noticing it and saying, wow, you know, campus is looking so good.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, you know.
Now, the thing I would tell you with everything we're looking at is we are continuing to fund teacher salaries at a conservative approach in relationship to, you got to remember, every school district in the county, excluding, and Mountain Pine just did a mill, Jessieville hadn't run one, but the majority of them in the last 2 years and the next 3 years are going to continue to put quite a bit of money into teacher salaries. And so what we're doing is we're putting money back into teacher salaries as a component of this.
Mm-hmm.
But you could talk to people in the community and they'd say, take everything off of this list and put $2,000 into reoccurring salaries. And so you're going to hear that. And you need to know that somebody is going to tell you that. And so you have to be armed with, I realize and respect that, but we're trying to sustain a level of a balance so that we are continuing to put money towards salaries and do it in a manner where we can sustain salary increases versus what you just went through, which was a 7-year lull. Because that's what you just went through. And we're just now beginning to recover from it because the first time we've changed the base was in June.
Yeah. For the first time in 7 years.
Or 8.
Yeah.
So, and that goes full circle to what you were seeing on that page with all the instability. When you choose to do that with your money, you're going to create instability. And so, you know, this won't totally level instability in that context, but I think beginning to put money into the salary schedule, if you're going to be doing these special projects and you choose not to put money into the salary schedule, that will be a mistake. So it's got to be a balance of, it's really 3 levers. It's your capital improvements, it's one time, it's sustaining a quality salary schedule, and it's your new staffing model. That's what the decision-making process has always looked like in a leadership role in a chair where I'm sitting. And so you really have to evaluate the cause and effect and the affordability and what we gain in that because, you know, a communication director to support our website, build our website out, build out the social media prong is something that is going to have to be considered if we want to change the overall and build out a consistent level of communication, not sporadic.
Right. Yeah.
So, I mean, you know, and it goes full circle to, I've got to show you that we have a structural gap so that you have the confidence to hire the people to fill it and to purchase the things to carry it on out a few more years. And so there's 2 ways of doing that. You know, it can all be about salary and we don't get to do the other 2. Or it could all be about the buses, or, you know, we could literally, you know, do nothing else and probably buy 6 or 7 school buses.
Yeah, but I don't
That
think
probably wouldn't be realistic.
It wouldn't be.
My point is now you're over here in
Right.
this silo
Right.
and you're not
And
in
we're
the
not
salary.
addressing all of the
But
others.
then with just addressing salary, you're not going to address your staffing needs.
Right.
So I'm trying to just get everyone thinking in the context of that bigger picture. And then, of course, we want to follow up and have conversations with each other have conversations with me regarding questions. Questions are not a bad thing. Questions help develop our direction
Okay.
in that context.
So, gavel lady.
618.
Yeah,
Gavel him?
yeah.
Oh.
So, I mean, I'm saying.
I thought we were bunching the 2, 3, and 4 together when we're starting fresh
Well,
on
we
5.
are kind of, I just want to say,
One thing.
yeah, we're gonna kind of move into the
Yes.
2021 as part of this
We already-
continuing discussion. But because there are some things that you have listed here with a tentative approved date.
Those
like
are, all I'm doing there is saying, if you were to consider these things,
Right.
here would be some appropriate timeframes.
Right.
What this does is this creates an accountability measure for the team collectively, and on the back end, the board as well. It's not a truly agreed upon goal, but it
Right.
kind of sets a stage to the work to be done.
Okay, and I know we talked about the restructure of the classified schedule. Is somebody actively working on that?
Not
Right
at this
now?
point,
Okay.
no. The only work that we've done at this point is I've met with individual employees. I've had some conversations around the evaluative process. We've been finding duties and descriptions. And so it would be probably a 6-week to 2-month window to get us through that process. So that's a December approval timeframe would put us on a tight schedule to complete the project in the fall, because that type of work honestly has to be done in the off-season of hiring, or it will not get done. And so I put stuff like that in my line of work into the fall, because once we get to the spring, we're gonna be back in the employment phase.
Right,
Well,
We're in the employment phase now,
yeah.
but you're only
We're-
employing
we're-
one.
Yeah,
You're only employing one.
so.
This week.
Yeah. So on the instructional coaches and facilitators, okay, so we had instructional facilitators and we changed their title, right? Didn't we?
Describe what you have in your buildings currently.
I thought we had them and then we moved them to a different role and,
What we did is we addressed the law for dyslexia. And so we took the instructional facilitator in the elementary school, and she took on a caseload of students from the beginning of the day to the end of the day, dealing with the dyslexia intervention, and the instructional facilitator was eliminated. So she's working with kids
Okay.
all day.
so she's,
So that
Okay.
position was taken
And I know
out. She's
that
still on staff.
we were-
And then Becky was serving in the middle school, and she did instructional facilitation, data analysis, worked with teachers in that regard. When Mr. Campbell was moved here, she was moved into the assistant principal role. We did not fill that position.
right,
And then at the secondary level, we did not have one, but we have used Celeste Bird a little bit, but I would not call her an instructional facilitator, because she's doing dyslexia intervention about 3/4 of the day, and she's heading up our journalism class, which is going to roll out the quarterly district newsletter that's going to go out. So she's in charge of that program. So
So
and
we
Mr.
do-
Krager was initially brought in
Yes.
as an instructional facilitator at the high school.
Okay.
And then he morphed over into that IPT
IPT.
program.
he wanted to
So
do
he was part-time, and then
IPT.
he was
Right.
full-time
Full-time.
IPT.
okay. And so we need to hire back instructional facilitators for each building.
In some capacity, I'm still looking for feedback. Is it going to be, yes, a full-time FTE in each building, but I want to make sure that we distinctly define their role, their responsibility upon employment. But I feel like we're at a point going into this next year. We look at our staff, we advertise early, we find out who our best potential players are internally. And we look internally and pair that against someone externally, but it would be supporting our staff in the area of literacy and the
RISE.
Google Apps for Education, RISE
RISE
initiative.
initiative.
Yes. So, yeah, I think that, that's an area. The reason I put it in April is I felt like we need to give ourselves ample time to see who's returning, and plus find out who may be interested in that type of role. You could start that advertisement process roughly February, and have a recommendation by that point in time. you know, that may be something that you want to commit to before you even, I have to prove to you a salary increase. That's really the will of the board. I do feel like that we could make a recommendation for a salary increase. My goal is to not have reoccurring money in classified salary schedule changes to exceed $60,000 to $70,000. So when you get done with that whole schedule,
Unclassified?
from top to bottom, everybody that you touch in the whole system, I cannot allow that structure to exceed $100,000. It needs to be pared down 75 or less. I think it can be effective in that regard and be relevant, but you know, if you're gonna go dump that kind of money into the classified schedule, then you need to be putting $1,000 on the base,
Yeah.
On the certified.
certified.
On the certified side, yes. And you're putting, you're throwing out there an early retirement incentive?
What that would allude to is if you come to us in January and you say you're gonna retire, we'll write you a check for $500 if you give us your resignation and let us approve it. That
And
gives,
what is the benefit of that?
we'd have a half a year to plan from the budget perspective. Most of the time, retirees don't retire until May or June.
Right.
And then we get hung trying to figure out
Oh,
how you
gotcha.
restructure. And so on a retirement position, the other reason you write the $500 check is at the point, maybe you get somebody to retire a year early and you're hiring back in. Depending on the individual, it could be a great thing or it could be a terrible thing based on where they're at in their career.
Right.
It's quality versus expense. And so a $500 incentive just allows our team to plan
Just
and the board
letting them know
to
early.
plan. Because if they tell us in January, we've got the next
You
almost
can-
5 months to plan before the next year rolls out.
And you can hire in the
Right
right
season.
part of the season when you can get your best
There you go.
choices.
Yes,
But
ma'am.
there would be a qualifying criteria, I would assume. They'd have to be eligible for retirement. just
Yeah,
not-
they'd have to be eligible for
Not
retirement,
just
just
wanting to
because
move
you
to another
resign.
district.
No, we're not gonna
And
pay for
they
you
tell
to
you they're
leave.
gonna
Right.
retire.
Yeah,
Right,
it truly
right.
has to be retirement. It's a retirement incentive, and so you have to prove retirement, you're going towards retirement in that process.
Okay.
Good point. I'm still stuck on the other one. I think I had something else in there on the employment contract. I'm not sure that we can do that
What
by
is
law.
that?
That would be if
Oh,
you come to us and you
breaking
want out of your
contract.
contract in June, you're gonna have to
Oh, I
pay
see.
$500. You get out of your contract in July, it's gonna be $1,000. You get out of your contract in August, it's gonna be $2,000.
Gotcha. But you're discussing that with legal as
Yes.
if you can even.
I think you can write it. I think if push come to
Not
shove, I don't know if you
enforceable.
can institute it.
Right.
Well, in a year like this year, folks don't have contracts that reflect this year's salary schedule yet. So
Right.
if you didn't, for some reason, sign, because you don't have to have one because you're hired.
Right.
So, for instance, you may have approved tonight someone's resignation who never signed a contract for this year,
Right.
okay?
Which is very uncommon, because if we're giving the contracts, we should be collecting them.
Right.
But what you're talking about is in June, we changed
Changed the
the
contract.
rate of compensation. And
Right.
so rolling out the new rate of compensation, that's the other reason that you want your increases to the salary schedule to become reflective of the initial contract. So that's why I'm recommending that you change the rate of pay at an earlier time frame, so that when we get ready to
Gotcha.
put contracts together, we're not sending 2 sets of contracts
Right.
out, we're sending out one.
Right. So if you want to add 500 to the base, do it in January.
Yes.
And that way, everybody knows, and then you can get it on the contract.
And you need to
appropriate it on the
understand that the first thing we had to do was get our financial feet on the ground before we started adding money to the base. And so we're beginning to see patterns to where I feel confident that you can begin to do this, because I'm not gonna make those recommendations till I first see a pattern that shows us we can do it and fund it. And so we did June this year, I think we'll be fine to do January the following year, and then we'll review those balances again, see where we're at, see if we want to do that again for the upcoming year.
Okay, I have a question about the Chromebooks that's below that. Hayden, $40,000 to $60,000 to or to, what do you do? Turn in the old ones? Or
We usually,
what?
we'll move them down to elementary is what we usually do. So we'll collect the ones from high school, rotate them down,
Okay.
discard the ones from elementary. We either use our new service, we're about to start using gov deals. So we can try to sell those legally now.
Okay.
Before we could not, we could only donate.
Okay.
So that'd be a new option we'll probably do.
Okay.
So yeah, usually every 3 years we do a Chromebook recycle. Google promises, like just for testing Windows, like I said, we do NWA testing, we do map testing, and what's that, ACT Aspire. And Google will guarantee you a Chromebook can stay updated for a minimum of 6 years.
Right.
So we have to have a refresh cycle.
So even in the elementary, they test on their Chromebooks?
Mhm.
They just
Everybody
don't take
tests
theirs
online.
home?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
Hey,
all
come
online.
on in. Okay, so.
He came here because he knew that was the next item on the list.
I know, it says it's next on the list. But do you do some Chromebooks every year or every other year?
Usually every other year.
Every other year you're doing Chromebooks,
Right.
so, okay.
Mhm.
So next year, not this school year, but the next
Correct.
school year will be time
Right.
to handle a third of them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, elementary Chromebooks are roughly pushing about 5 years old.
But they don't
their
use them
time
that
ready.
much, do they?
Right, that's
Well, they
why.
don't leave the classroom.
Right,
That's
that-
the first thing.
Yeah.
Because as soon as they start packing them around,
I was gonna say, don't
They
they
break a
use
lot
pencil and paper
Yeah.
more than they use their Chromebooks?
Mhm.
So that's probably okay for the
Right.
little ones.
It is.
Yeah.
and so you've been pretty much in a Chromebook recycle rotation since probably what, 2013 with your
2013.
implementation?
2013.
So this is not, what, if you haven't seen it, it's just been money we've allocated in the capital improvement plan under equipment and
Right.
done it. I'm trying to take a brand new board and arm them with the
Mhm.
information to kind of move forward.
Okay.
The reason I listed faces is if we don't get the federal allotment, we may want to consider a $130,000 reoccurring allocation to fund an after-school program locally.
Yeah.
I think we sit tight, write to grant, see what the end results are, but I don't think, I don't think you'll know until late. I think
Yeah.
Jessieville was notified in June.
I think you have to be prepared
Yeah.
to.
But we're
put-
good this year.
We're good. We're funded through the year. So we've got our after-school program intact. It's up and running. That's where you just come from, I'm sure.
That's right.
And so with that, when it roughly doesn't end till, what, 6-ish?
6, we have a little, if we have a kid that's late being picked up, we have one kid that get picked up at 6:20.
But usually 6 o'clock's when you're finished up.
How many
So
students we have in that program?
total that you got right
How
now?
many?
158 enrolled. Tonight, I think we had 134.
Wow.
Great.
I did not
158
realize you had
enrolled.
so many in there.
Last year, we ran over 300 kids total through the program over the course of the year, because some kids will enroll in the spring because they play fall sports, and some kids will enroll in the fall because they play spring sports.
Right.
But total kids, we ran right at 300 last year.
Wow.
And that's K through.
K through four.
K through 4. Yeah.
And you're limited to K through 4 right now because of
With
the
the current
grant?
grant, the way it's written. But Dr. Murphy and I talked about if we go locally, we might want to expand to 5th and 6th.
Yeah.
Right.
Because I know some of that's,
Awesome.
even 5th and 6th graders are young to be going
Right.
home on a bus
To
and
know.
to an empty house.
That's right.
If we can, yeah.
So.
Sounds like a great program.
Yeah, it is. It really, it's worth your time if you haven't seen it. I would encourage you as a board member to take a time during, just contact Mr. Frame, go look at the whole thing, because it's pretty impressive to see the wide array of activities, and they schedule it in intervals of 6 or 7 weeks.
No, it's, the first 3 sessions are 7 weeks long, the last
7.
session is 6.
So you go 7 weeks in the intervals, and so we have staff members that sign up for certain intervals. We have volunteers for certain intervals. We're partnering with a group to establish Answering the Call, which is going to feed back into the village for North Garland County, where we can get people to sign up to volunteer in our school district, Jessieville, or Mountain Pine School District. So we're trying to expand the volunteer approach,
Yeah.
and we've got a good volunteer base in that after-school program.
Yeah.
So I heard the gavel.
Yeah, is 130 for K through 4 as it is now?
That's how many you
That was
had
just there
today.
today.
No, 130,000, I'm sorry.
Oh,
Is
$130,000.
that for what it is now? How much would it be for 5th and 6th grade? How much more would it be approximately?
Well, you're looking at probably at least another 4 teachers, so you're probably looking at another 15 to 20,000.
That's what I figured.
Yeah.
So 150.
Yeah.
Yeah, if we funded between 140 and 150,000, if we allocated that, we could probably do our own K-6 program. Especially with the structure we already have. My greatest concern right now is we built this significant structure and it runs like a well-oiled machine.
Yes.
And if we take it off the table for 2 years, it'll take you forever to get it built back up.
Yeah. And you're gonna leave a lot of parents in a bind who depend on that program now, especially your, yeah.
So
Okay,
I want to
so
spend a
6:30.
little bit of time with you guys tonight, just showing you in the context of, we mentioned the land purchase. I want to kind of dig into maybe a why component of that land purchase and see if we got questions there. A roadway entrance is a part of long-range planning, additional parking, sidewalks. We've really kicked around trying to prioritize, if we did build space, how much space we would need. I would tell you with where we're at as a governance structure, I really want you to understand that my position is that we take the time to facilitate a solid plan and give us a solid 18 months of planning time before we ever go back to the voters again. And so from where I'm at, based on what occurred in May, with the
Changes on the
dynamics within the
board.
board, and that's not a total make or break in terms of getting somebody up to speed, but I think just building capacity in the village and our community about what we need. To do that, we need more time. So I'm more inclined to get you to target and partner with me based on the available structural flexibility we have as a board. I've shown you tonight that we can make decisions locally without new money
Right.
and make some pretty solid decisions for the community.
Mm-hmm.
And then put ourselves in a position to figure out and engage the community on how we want to take those next steps and how aggressively we want to take those next steps. Because it could be that our community doesn't want to engage in anything more than maybe just a parking lot here to expand gym parking. That could be controlled locally. But kind of click on some of our work that we've been doing. I've had Josh come back together, and what I've had him put together, just a little bit of a capstone. Our master facility plan in total is right at 135 pages. That is a district-owned document. Hit the plus there one time. Just blow that one up.
There's a plus down there. Just zoom it in. The other one. Oh, there you go. That's fine.
That'll work. So what you're seeing here is he kind of started identifying our, you've seen this slide before, that's all the buildings, that's the area. Back over to your left is the spring. Continue on to the next slide. When we ended up purchasing the property, originally we were looking at originally I looked at a barrier between us and the neighbor. Because when I took the job, I was told our press box was not on our property. And so with that, I began to explore that and found out that, yeah, probably right. And it was for sale, and so we began a negotiation process. We ultimately bought 20 acres and expanded the opportunities for the school district in behind the football field. So what I've reminded the board is the community has truly only owned this 20 acres behind the football field for a little over 2 years. And so you've been kind of landlocked for life without truly even being able to have conversations of what you could do if you could get around behind the football field, because getting around behind the football field, guess what? Wasn't an option.
Right.
So we've got to educate the community, I think, first and foremost on maybe the why. Of course, we laid out a template in the original property purchase of some things we could do. It could be that that could end up, it could be a building site location. It could be a sports complex. It could be the development of a sports complex through multiple years. But if you go on down there, we begin to shape this thing up a little bit, and we think in the element of targeted zones and egress. And so what you're looking at now is you're seeing kind of how we exist on the current campus is in this format here of park and the campus drive, and then our cut through is on through the gut. It's cutting right through the middle of our campus. And so what our parents experience is trying to cut through the middle of everything else to get to a location, and really there's no relief out of it until it all flows at the same time. And so what we looked at with this property purchase is how do we potentially gain new egress. My greatest concern was not so much the fact that what you had here was cutting through the campus, but what you have here in about 3 years, you're going to struggle to put anyone out on the highway to control traffic. Because when you go to 3 lanes across through there and you have a middle turning lane, that'll be the point where I tell Frank to no longer put on a jacket and get out there in the middle of all that.
Thank you.
Because he'll get killed. It's bad enough right now because he's standing right there.
Yeah.
And right there's where the light will be, at the intersection of Faison and this drive. So I think the community has to respect the fact that once we get this middle lane in here, we've got to figure out how to get people safely off our campus without people stopping traffic, and we got a lot of student drivers. And so in this concept, we kind of identified a thoroughfare, if you will, knowing that this is a property that we don't own, and so we kind of had a zone area here and another zone, and then this is a decision-making area, someday maybe a roundabout back here, and then possibly, this is our tennis courts that exist currently back in this area. So just kind of visualize that as a concept, and so that kind of drove us to think that a property purchase could expand district board possibilities long term, because without the property purchase, you kind of remained, everything had to funnel between the football field and the K1 building. And of course we did a lot of homework over here on this side, and this over here is very tough to develop. I don't know if you've ever been up at the bus garage and lost your footing over there in a certain area, but if you did, we'd go visit you in the hospital because it's straight up and down. So this land we own, but it would be very difficult to ever make it usable to develop. And so the proximity to, it's back in there tied on, what is that, Mondo?
Mondo, what is that road back there?
Is that road in behind Sonic?
Manassas Gap, that's what it is.
And so, yeah, Manassas, yeah. So we kind of looked at trying to go that way, and nothing looked appealing for egress when you really get back in there and start thinking about managing traffic flow over there based on how that road's being maintained. So we kind of went this direction as far as a conceptual idea. If you'll go on down, you've got a couple of things to consider. This shows you a diagram of whether you stay on our side of the creek or the other side of the creek. And so what this is showing you is the original egress that we purchased. This is the border of our property, and we purchased right down to here. We've got property that runs up through here. So we have an avenue to come down here and connect to the highway. Nobody can tell us, that we cannot connect to the highway. So we've got access to connect to the highway. What we have is a challenge of significant fill to make the connection with crossing the creek. And so we've done kind of a cost analysis, and so we're trying to flow this roadway, which is on this side of the creek, to get to that point. and conceptually coming up this side and trying to crosswalk those, and that's what I'm gonna kind of show you tonight in terms of the two options.
Right there, right.
Everything has been site survey. We're not doing anything on topo estimates. Everything we've got, all these decisions that you're looking at and these numbers, they're truly based on the pinning of this. Can you hit that plus one more time? And so option, roll just a little bit. Other way. There you go. Option one, utilize our own property. If we wanted to get the box culvert in with a 25-year flood, crossing the creek's $100,000. If we want the 50-year flood, it's going to cost us $160,000. You might say there's no way on earth it would cost that much. By the time you get to fill on each side of it, here again, this is a cost estimate. We try to do it our own. We might come in there for short of 300, might get it done for 250, but you're still building a road. You're moving cubic yards of earth, the total length of it. So they created the estimate and they created a comparison. So to get up the hill in that regard would run in the neighborhood of 326 to 380. If we stayed on this other side of the creek, on the other landowner, then we would move much less cubic yards. And so with the property purchase in that range that I've discussed individually with you and adding an additional $37,000 to it, you should be able to get the roadway up on that side. So when you cash flow the two, even though the purchase of the property is very expensive, it's $100,000 less roughly than what you would be doing if you worked off of the existing property and crossed the creek. So it has merit to consider in the element of purchase, and I'm currently at a point where got a verbal acceptance, but I'm now trying to work to move forward with some form of a contract, at which point in time it's still at the board's discretion to approve or deny. But I'm currently negotiating that property. And so you just need to be aware of that. And you need to understand the rationale why. I've told the leadership team, people have to understand the rationale why to even understand why you would consider the purchase. Because it's very expensive. But what it could do for the school district, if you kind of go on a little bit, in terms of flexibility, continue, I don't think that holds too much merit. Back up one, if you would, one smaller. Hit your minus. There you go. There you go a little bit so we can kind of see what we're right there. So in looking at this, now we've pinned, Hayden, this is the area where the roundabout would be, so we pinned all this area. We're really trying to nail down whether we could build out, you know, I had some discussion with board members about could we utilize the current tennis courts as a building site location, future building site location. So in that, we've been looking at could we relocate the tennis courts to the upper area with everything else and use this as a potential build-out site location. What would be the pros and cons of that versus going to the back side of the campus? And so this document here kind of shows you a magnitude of cut and fill. He was here one night with us, kind of talked about this a little bit. It's so tiny. Go back just a little bit.
That one gives you.
There.
Yeah, I have the plus sign.
So what we cut is in red. What we fill, of course, is in green. And we have a net cubic yard balance of 145,000. And that would give us enough cubic yards to take elsewhere on the campus to go ahead and site develop a building site. So as you're developing this site location and this roadway and this parking and future development behind the press box, you're taking the excess and you're developing a site location to go build a school at some point. And if you don't need it in the inception, you've at least got it leveled off and you're good to go when you do need it. So that's an option and a theory. Don't have to take any of it into practice, but that gives you an idea. If you set a grade at a certain level, That's how much cubic yards you'd have to move based on the engineering survey. This is, you know,
And at $10 a cubic yard, they're showing that a cost of 3.25 million?
yes. And that would do all excavation. So it said, wow, that's a setback number. So then they show you some different options in there, kind of scroll on down. When we kind of looked at that a little bit more in depth, if you went that route, what this shows you is this is our property line. This is our new developmental area.
Back out.
And this is the roadway that would come off the hill. So what this shows you is, this shows you the parcel that we're purchasing. Okay, if we purchase, that's the zoned out part. You could potentially have that area, and you could bring that roadway in through here and dump it off here. It could dovetail back. There's an old road bed up there. I don't know that we want to put people in that situation, but it may be that for car ride or pickup or something that we end up doing that long term. Here again, we were just planning, how do we get people from location to location? By relocating the tennis courts, this becomes a developmental area, and maybe this roadway could feed into this and back out, so that the roadway allows for egress in a different route off the campus back to 5, and allows you to go out the backside to Fox Pass as well. So, you know, when people ask, what were you thinking when we bought the property? This is kind of the overall game plan long term as it relates to the site development. So there's enough room, if you really wanted to level it, for you could still have enough room to move this slightly and come across from here, and probably, Brian, you and I, we may never see either one of those built, or if we grow dramatically, could see both of them built. But we need to design a footprint for the next generation to have a field house, an indoor, and all their facilities right there, if you want to take that to be a sports complex. And the only pieces we may get out of it is a parking lot in the inception of this board. And it may be that the inception of this board takes additional steps. I would tell you that we're kicking around figuring out how far we can take a plan and scale the money back, because what we're estimating in cubic yards has an end timeline, where if we did time and materials with someone, we're getting cost estimates to clear land in a more, not as quick a timeline. And when you don't accelerate the timeline, you get work done cheaper, because they can do work elsewhere. And so if we did some of this work out of our money, we could actually, without ever going up here, and I think this is an important piece, because if we never could afford to even get to here, we could get to here. And if we get from here to here, we quit blocking the road, because this becomes where everybody turns in to come into the campus to go pick up anyone. And so we bring everybody in, and then at this point, they decide to pick up back here or back down here. And you can at least get them stacked and get them off the road. And this space here could be developed back out into additional student parking and gymnasium parking and staff parking as well, in terms of overflow. If you have an event at the auditorium and an event at the gym, you gotta have some place to go with people. So this could be a 2-tiered parking lot. You may be visualizing this. It could come all the way down to the same grade, or it could be that you have an elevation grade 10 feet higher in this lot than what you have in your current lot. Ag building's right there. But you're going after a parcel of property that you could end up with additional parking within walking distance back to the gymnasium. And it could be an isolated student parking lot for high school students completely during the school day. Because right now we have students parking next to staff members, we have students parking down to the safe room, we have students, and it's hard to keep all of our students in the same location because there's not enough room for students and staff to, they don't have designated areas because there's not a designated area big enough. And so that would help your safety in terms of if we could get all of the student vehicles in the same location. So just a few things that, what they did here for the sake of time is they cut the elevation point, and as you can see, there's not quite as much red and a little more green, and so they throwed around some different ideas, and they drove the price point down to 1.9 million, and it begins to look different, feel a little bit different, may not be quite as functional, but you didn't move $3.5 million worth of dirt. If you go to the next one, this is back to option 1. This option here, go up just a little bit, Robin, so I can see the reading of that. Here was the complete leveling of the site to make it functional as level. And so it could get as high as 4 million if you do all of it. You could save some money by not taking that road all the way down to safe room B and take it out by the existing field house and bring it down by the car rider line. You could probably cut some money out of it that way. So this is not the final option. It is an A option, but what this does, if you'll go on down, if you look at kind of gives you all 3 options comparable, and I want you to kind of study those at your own discretion, and we can kind of talk about them. If we would go down a little bit further, Robin. I just want you to kind of see a visual of all of it. Now, if you did all of this as a full-blown measure with a tight timeline on it, you're back to looking at roughly $15 million to do it all. That would be turf ball fields, that would be an indoor that would be half the length of a football field, that'd be a new weight room, a new coach's office, everything. Your tennis courts would be moved up there. You'd have a baseball and a softball field along with all the parking for your extracurriculars. And I'm sure we would have a huge bandstand built in there as well. New bleachers. Move the bleachers up from the existing football field, move all that, build new home stadium bleachers. I mean, it'd be a major project. But as an end result, what would it look like? Kind of going down. That's kind of looking at it from a distance. That's what it would kind of look like. You can kind of see the ball fields back in behind the press box, and then the other facility on that end. Continue on down. There's, I think, another picture. That's what it could kind of look like as an end result. I wanted you to just, kind of see some of that. It doesn't mean that all those pieces have to go at the same time, but you can kind of see what kind of functionality that could create in terms of egress into the buildings, as far as, especially the stadium in that regard. Kind of going down a little bit further. There's a pretty good look at how they laid out the fields. You can kind of see it in that arrangement from that side. And is that it? Yeah, I think so in terms of that. I do have I talked to Todd. We're really not sold that a pre-K, 2 years from now, if you did, we did an analysis where we put the pre-K on the lower level. Go back up just a little bit. I'll show you what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Indoor facility.
Up some more. Keep going. There should be a picture. Maybe it's on that other one. It's on my pre-K.
Yeah, it's not on this one.
It's not on that one. You guys know where you drive up from the ag building towards the bus
Gate
parking
lot.
lot through that gate. There's a pretty good grade there, and so what we had looked at doing is on the lower level build safe rooms and put 5 pre-Ks in there on the bottom level and go ahead and build out the foundation and take care of that elevation grade, and then we could put a facility on top of it. And I think Corey, I don't know if you ever got to see that or not. Cindy, you did.
Yes, I did.
Cindy has seen that.
It was
Cindy
part
and
of the
Dana.
millage.
It was part of the
Yeah, it
millage
was.
campaign originally. So, where we're at, if you kind of go full circle back to with the time we have remaining, which we're about out of time, but we really need to think about what we can control. And in terms of what we control currently, is the investment of how we manage this structural flexibility that we now have and where we devote it, and then what we do with our balances over the next 3 years. Those are things you need to be kind of thinking about, and thinking about what a realistic solution could look like, because I can tell you that with what Hayden is presenting to me as far as working time and materials, it could be very realistically that we could get a roadway and an additional parking lot and a property purchase and make it all the way up to probably past the bus turnaround area before we had to stop. But that would be about where our money runs out locally.
The
And then our-
visitors bus turnaround.
The bus turnaround up
Where the visitors
where the
buses
visitors
turn
buses
around.
turn around. You guys know where that area is at up there?
Yeah,
Where is it?
behind the egg.
Up behind the egg building.
Okay, okay, yeah.
Okay.
Behind the scoreboard.
Not the bus line back by.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
No, just going up here, just up here where the gravel area is at,
At
no
the
one
end of
ever
the
goes up
track?
there,
Yeah,
yes.
Right behind the scoreboard.
We could probably conceivably get a road just short of that point. And we think we could do that in the neighborhood of 700,000. But it would take us probably a full year to a year and a half,
We could do
slowly watching it happen.
It could be an acre at a time. We have a process to do an acre at a time.
Right,
And again,
clearing it
that-
off.
And now it's around $6,200 an acre. But again, you're dealing with the terrain we're dealing with. You know, it's not,
Right.
we're not dealing with a flat lot.
Right.
So that's where that 62 number comes from.
And then from there, we would do time and materials on excavation, hire an excavator and do time and materials. And when we got to a stopping point, if we wanted to see what we could do for $250,000, we go do what we could do for that. And then we look at it and say, okay, we're done, or okay, we need to do 100,000 more. And it may be that the community says, hey, that's a really good idea. And we'd have to tell them this is all we can afford. If you want to see this through, you need to help us make it happen. So, you know, we're not making any decisions here this evening other than really framing out. I want you to spend time looking at where we're at with cash flow. I want you to fully kind of understand that. I would tell you that I think I'm committed to making a recommendation based on the revenue that we've gained in Fund 6. I think we need to invest in a social worker, and we need to invest in a mental health specialist. In our school district with our demographic, I think that would be something that you will see brought to you for the current year, and be a place for us to begin to see if we can make a difference academically based on shaping the social side of things for some kids.
Mhm. And this would be to serve all grades or mostly high school?
It would probably end up serving, if I was guessing, it probably wouldn't get into the high school much. I think
Oh, really?
if you're realistically going to serve
Serve the
K,
lower
if you're gonna
ones?
serve K-12, you probably need to be thinking about iron minimum too. Now, a social worker could serve K-12. There's no doubt. When
What
I've
would
had a
the-
social worker, they could serve K-12. I'm afraid that I would hate to tell you that if we hire a mental health specialist, that their caseload would not fill, and we could use them K all the way through 12 for they filled. I think we'd fill their caseload pretty quick.
What's the difference between the two positions? But, I mean, what does a social worker do that a mental health professional does not do?
Do you guys want to take a stab at it, or you want me to?
It's
I can.
the
I've
degree of
hired a
service.
social worker,
It's
so.
the degree of service and the degree of training.
Okay.
Often cases, our licensed social workers are therapists in training
Mhm.
on their way to being therapists.
So they can still
So-
see children on an individual basis?
Right, they're touching base with kids, and then the
And
therapist
families,
comes
yeah.
in and
Can a mental health professional prescribe?
depends on
Just wondering, is
What
that,
level
Right.
you're at, what degree.
Degree.
Yeah, depending on the degree. I mean,
Okay.
we could structure that depending on
So-
the investment, what we wanted to spend, we could get to that level.
I
The
just
thing we're
didn't know.
seeking is more of a consistent, we need a consistent face on campus.
Yes.
We're contracting with multiple agencies.
we're
that are
not
coming
contracting
in.
with anybody.
but they're coming in.
Where they're coming in.
And they have a much greater level of expertise than our regular counselors do.
Yes.
They're not qualified to deal with some of these mental health issues.
School-based, everything.
So our counselors, you're saying, are not equipped to handle with some of the more extreme cases?
Not at all.
And so we have somebody like community counseling coming in or something?
Yeah.
We have
They can-
anybody.
Anybody that,
Multiple
Depends on who
agencies
they
who come
are.
out.
like a parent can contract with a service
Yes.
and they can come on campus
That's
to
correct.
see students.
And that wouldn't stop.
Right.
That would not, we would continue that partnership.
Okay, but we would have somebody on campus and the kids would all learn that person or persons and be able to go and see them.
Well, students that we would identify that currently are not in a relationship with a caseworker that would qualify, that we could provide assistance, we would have a place to recommend and get them to someone in a timely fashion.
I think
versus
that's
waiting
just
for a case.
critically important in
Sometimes
this
we have
day
to
and age.
wait for someone or call someone or something like that.
Yeah,
I
it'd be
think-
nice to have somebody on campus.
I think Lake Hamilton ended up hiring 2 and 2.
It's like 1.5. I think one's just part-time.
One full social worker, or 1.5 social workers?
Something like that.
Or did they hire, I thought they hired a counselor as well. A mental
Maybe
health.
it's one. something
Maybe it's
like
1
that.
and 1.
Now, I know at one point we were at our, like, limit of students, we were facing the need to hire another counselor. Would this suffice? This would not fill that
No.
requirement, so it's
We've
totally
handled-
separate.
Right, it'd be a separate, it's more of a, it's a different categorical, it's not gonna,
Okay.
it's not gonna help us meet our counseling numbers.
Okay, I didn't know if that counted or not.
Yeah.
This is kind of like Fountain Lake choosing to pay for pre-K.
Right?
We don't have to have pre-K, we don't have to pay for pre-K, but we as a district choose to.
Right,
We would be choosing to
hire.
hire these people
okay,
for the benefit of our students. We don't have to,
right,
but we would be choosing to because we believe it to be the right thing to do.
yes,
Because we believe there is a cause and effect if you don't.
absolutely.
And there's a need for.
More so than it's the right thing. It's the right thing to do, but there's a cause and effect if you choose not to.
Absolutely.
And the social worker would be working with the state agencies,
Mhm.
Department of Social Services.
They would
With
have a
attendance.
lot of,
Liaison.
like, yeah,
Right.
they could,
Mhm.
yeah.
Resources.
Right now, and it's not to knock the system, but when these guys start an attendance issue, by the time they get any support in the attendance issue, it's a second semester. For a student who chooses and a family who chooses not to come to school. If we had a social worker, we could intervene much
Okay.
quicker to get children in school, so that we don't have these 9-week gaps where we have intermittent to no attendance without anybody
Making contact.
making contact on that.
Wow. Yeah, I do think that's important. Sad. I think we've just reached that point in society where that's just becoming a more necessary thing on campus, you know. Schools used to be able to just educate kids and the rest of it happened at home, but we don't have that situation or that luxury anymore.
Or we chose to educate the kids who came, and now you're trying to do this all thing.
Right.
So when you choose to educate all, you have to design strategies to get all of them here.
That's the first step.
That helps.
It does help when they're here.
Just think.
Yeah, that is the
But I've been
first
sitting
step.
there for 2 hours and 7 minutes too. Gather person.
Listen, y'all, he said, we're running out of time. We got 2 minutes, so I thought he's not gonna forget. He's running out of time.
Was that a gavel or?
No, oh,
did you
yes.
just lay down?
I went like that, I did this, and you guys were just chatting away.
Dr. Murphy.
So we can entertain additional questions, or we can reconvene at some point. I'm more than willing to meet with any of you individually, willing to, if you want to save time for the sake of me and someone else, we could meet in groups of 3. If we reconvene in groups of 2, if we reconvene in groups of 3 or more, we need to call a meeting.
Right.
And so any of those things are options. At the end of the day, we just need to work closely as a unit to make good, sound decisions for the future of the students. And my job is to make sure that you guys feel confident that we have the money to make those decisions.
May I ask the next time we bring this, if we can have some numbers and you have your comfort level, because I know you've got a threshold that you don't want to drop below on
Right.
balances.
Right.
And let us know what that is so that we know what we're working with. Because I think we've got some good ideas here. We just need to know what parameters are going to shape those ideas.
Okay.
Yeah,
And roughly what things are gonna cost us.
right, I was kind of wondering, like, in 3A, you know, what would it cost to get all that done? Be,
What?
like, item number,
First project.
The
yeah,
29.
the first set of projects,
Yeah.
you know.
The
All of
project I did.
those,
Mhm.
you're not gonna be able to do all of those in the
Right.
current year.
Right, but just an
But
estimate
that's
of what it would
cost.
cost to,
And maybe
To
a
do.
priority.
An order
list.
of priority would be nice.
Yeah,
I would
order of
assume the
priority.
buses, and, but 1 and 2 are probably right
One and
on,
two.
aren't they?
Well, but when you go down and you look at that land purchase, and if you wanted to
Right.
undertake that,
Take care, that'd be all.
then
That changes priorities.
then that changes what becomes number one on your list. I mean, some of that's little stuff that Hayden can,
Some of this,
Rip out the big-
some of this we can figure out a way to accomplish with, we roughly have almost $200,000 set aside in capital improvements to conduct small projects. So we're gonna be able to do some of these projects within the scope of just not changing the budget structure from year to year.
right.
What we're trying to do is pair what goes into giving us that flexibility in the current year with that and what some of these larger ticket items could be. I will tell you that if you want to renew the lighting in the auditorium, it's $40,000.
Minimum.
About $15,000 if you want to do the curtains and the choir robes are already ordered. But, you know.
But like the
Let's say
gym,
we're cautious.
well, you look at
Some
some
of
of the
that
stuff,
can come out of current money, some of it's gonna require a decision, but I felt like it's important that we show we're gonna support our theater department and our auditorium.
Yeah, sure.
but like the gym bleachers, I mean,
How much?
That came in at 32.
Yeah.
and how long they've been broke,
We screwed them to the floor last year.
yeah.
So they don't move.
Right.
Retract-
Or they won't move. Well, they move back, but when you put them back, you leave them back. When you put them out, you make sure you screw them down and they move.
I
So
like
they're,
the
they're not
PE
safe.
gym.
I understand.
What is the PE gym used for nowadays?
It's, runs children in and out of it all day long and it's used
I
in
mean,
our
that's
after-school
it, but it's for
program.
faces too, right? What is
Faces,
faces?
usually have ISS about 95 degrees in there.
Oh, yeah, ISS is up there.
It's very hot.
How does
It's in
it,
there.
how is that safe?
2A1
Yeah.
is now.
What is too
choir
hot?
robes.
Pretty much.
Sorry,
Yeah.
no, I mean, really.
Pretty much
Like
what
today
it
was hot.
what it is right now.
You don't go out if it.
I may be on borrowed time here.
It's usually the first month of
You need to
school.
get up
it's
and
the
activate.
same
You
thing.
gotta go.
Do what now?
Usually the first
I don't
month
have to go,
is the
but I may be on borrowed time.
Those
So
are
let's
the
There's
know a
no
little
air
bit
in the
more
PE
about
building.
this land
Just
purchase.
fans.
What did it say?
Okay, y'all listen up.
Once
Same way
we
it
know a
was
little bit,
Yeah,
like,
there's the-
you said you're in verbal agreement and we're going, when can we expect to see that on the agenda? Because I think that's, to me, that's critical if
My goal would be that you see it in September or October, so my
September
September
meeting
timeline
is
is next week. Right. But I'm awaiting a contract to be signed, so
Right.
if it's not signed, then I'm not in a position to recommend. So if
Right.
it is signed, you may be looking at a motion or
Okay.
tabling a motion.
I like the idea of getting that road extended because it is one of the goals is to get the traffic off,
Yes.
increase our safety of our students.
Mhm. I think that's, the roadway extension has been talked about for a couple of years now, and
And I would go
think
back
it's-
and remind you,
You're
I don't
saving
want you to
$100,000.
think that you're gonna lose all flexibility with that purchase because we've just taken our building fund balance from 1.6 million to 2 million.
yeah.
We were at 102% collection last year of the budget on the local tax.
Right.
Right. Okay.
So we
So,
we exceeded.
other questions? That was a good one. Yeah. Other questions or comments? Board members or staff, admin?
What I would like to
professional
ask
people.
is, as we leave tonight, to any board member, just tell me specifically as your day works. And I know some of you can't predict what your day holds, but if there's a time of the day that you could talk, is it midnight or daylight or somewhere in between? I just need to know that because sometimes I need to do more than text you.
Right.
And so I need to kind of know, so just kind of, just let me know, think about that, let me know.
You can call me anytime, and I'll tell you if I can call you back, or I can call.
You're on a poll or not.
Yeah.
I'm pretty much semi-retired, so you just text me, I'll let you know whether or not I've got a golf game or what I'm doing. No, I'll make myself available, is what I'm saying.
Okay.
If there are no other questions that are pertinent to this
Oh, we're gonna do that.
slideshow, I'm gonna officially adjourn our meeting at 7:14.
All
And
right.
thank you all for being here and enduring our conversation.
I want to thank the administrators for showing up
Yes.
as well.
Yes.
Giving up part of your evening.
I know. I appreciate it.